Hey everyone. I'm coming to you from my living room today. I'm having to sit on the floor because I can't actually use the bedroom where I usually film videos. A lot of this is because we have this Spanish plume thing going on. It's very hot and humid, and because this is a Saturday morning in Essex, everyone is out doing DIY. There's lots of noise. I can't close my windows without feeling like I'm going to die of heat exhaustion, so I've had to come to the coolest and most soundproof part of the house. Apologies for the radio silence. I know I haven't put a film video up for a while. It's because the past week has been quite bad for my health. I had this long-standing issue and it flared up a bit. Some other things came up. Despite everything that was going on, I also managed to drag my carcass to the View, which is just up the road here where I live in Dagenham, and I saw Suicide Squad. I liked it. I don't know if this hurts or helps anything I say about Suicide Squad, but I haven't seen Man of Steel and I haven't seen Batman v Superman. Man of Steel is just one of those things. I'm not particularly interested in Superman, so I just, for whatever reason, I hadn't caught it. With Batman v Superman, I was going to go and see that when it came out, but I realised that I would have been paying to see it in a cinema only to see how bad it was, to see if it was awful as the reviews I'd read and seen and some of my friends had told me it was. But for my part, yeah, I really liked this film. It's possibly one of the most superficial films I've ever seen. I mean, it's plastic as all hell, but that's how I describe Jason Bourne, which me and James went to see about 2 weeks ago. We were going to do another collaborative video on it, but that film was remarkable in the sense that it was completely unremarkable. We didn't have anything to say beyond our initial reactions, so we just had to let that one slide. And it was very flimsy in terms of what it was as a cinematic product. Suicide Squad is similarly flimsy, but it doesn't hurt it because this film is a roller coaster ride. It's clown shoes. It's meant to be kind of not disposable, but it's not something you should entirely take 100% seriously. As I say, I haven't seen the other DCEU films. The one thing I keep hearing about them is the fact that their tone is very, dark, and there's no enjoyment to be had from them. But Suicide Squad is very zany, and I think that's possibly what plays to its strengths. It is a strength that it exploits. I mean, at parts it did feel like it was like 8 hours long. Particularly in like the first 40 to 45 minutes when they were dealing with all the exposition, when they were introducing you to all of the characters and the setup for the entire movie. I really was not enjoying myself for that initial part of the movie. Largely because it was all shooed in, because they had to, because they had made the mistake, unlike Marvel, of not having separate films to set everything up in advance. So it means you had to cram in the introductions of, Deadshot and Captain Boomerang and Harley Quinn and the Enchantress and everything else. It was a drag. It was a bit of work to get through all of those introductions. But they did do the necessary work. And once the film kicks off, once the squad is assembled and they're starting to be rolled out for their first mission, it does kick up a gear. There's a lot to be entertained by in this film. I really liked Will Smith's portrayal of Deadshot. He was different to how I thought he would be. I was expecting him to be a lot more wisecracking and things like that, but he's actually quite down to earth, and I don't want to say gritty because that makes me think that he'd be gruff and growling and stuff, whereas he's actually just he's more straightforward. He's tough, he's self-confident, but obviously he's hampered by the fact that he has this daughter he's desperate to see and get back to. And that's, that's the stick it's the stick and the carrot that he's kind of led with. But I thought he was good. I really liked him in this. I thought it was a slightly different role for Will Smith, and I thought he handled it perfectly fine. Jay Courtney as Captain Boomerang, fine. Didn't really need to be there. He was disposable like Slipknot. I know a lot of stuff was built up about Slipknot and then, bye. The big one, obviously, was Harley Quinn. I did object to some of how she's been used in the marketing for Suicide Squad, because I'm very old now. And I remember when Harley Quinn first appeared back in the excellent 90s animated series. She was always, she's a violent psychopath. But she was also adorable. She wasn't overly sexualised. And this isn't me being like sex negative or something. It's just the fact that, for me, it was just a real jarring alteration to her character. Nothing wrong with change. I'm not denying that at all.
Back off, rich boy! I'm armed!
But it's the fact that it was so front and centre in terms of the marketing. And, it's a very clever way of doing things. A half-naked Margot Robbie is not something I'm going to discourage. But at the same time, you need to mix it up a little bit. But in the film, although they do play on her sexuality a lot, Margot Robbie really nails a lot of what I liked about the early 90s Harley Quinn. It is in there. You don't see it all the time, but there's the little touches. Especially when she, throws her arms around the Joker and calls him pudding and stuff like that. She did really well on that. And also, I think did go in assuming that Harley would dominate everything. That Deadshot would be front and centre because it was Will Smith, and that she would be front and centre with him because of how the character was used in the marketing. But I thought the team was actually far more balanced than I was expecting, especially in terms of the interplay between Will Smith and Rick Flag. I thought that worked quite well. It was slightly more it felt more balanced to me than I was really expecting, and that was a really pleasant surprise. So I do salute Suicide Squad for that. Oh, then there's Diablo, played by, I think it's Jay Hernandez, who I think was in Hostel, which was surprising to me because that film is horrendously bad, and he was really good in this. In some ways, he was probably my favourite character because he seemed to have the most depth and development and an arc to him. As the one who's resisting the urge to destroy shit and everything. In fact, in terms of how good a lot of the action is in this film, and how spectacular it is to see Deadshot on top of a car, killing the shit out of everyone, Harley going nuts with a baseball bat and things like that, doing their acrobatics, which is a lot of fun as well. Probably my favourite scene in the entire film is one where they're just all sitting in a bar talking, because you get a feel for these characters. They have competing ideas about what it means to be a bad guy. Diablo's very conscious of the fact that he has things to atone for, whereas Harley is very much like, this is who we are, this is what we do, and Deadshot is very much like, this is the life that I lead. And Diablo captures that quite nicely. Jared Leto as the Joker. Heath Ledger is still my favourite Joker in terms of who's on screen live action. Mark Hamill is the best Joker in my opinion. But he's really good. He was really compelling. But again, it would have been nice to see more of him. And I think there was a story that someone's actually suing the studio because the trailers made it look like he was in it more than he is. That's marketing. There's going to be some subterfuge. There's going to be some sleight of hand. Get over it. And that's the thing I'm probably going to say a lot about this film, and I will get on to that. But he was good. I liked the idea. I think it was a nice direction they'd taken him in. And it's Jared Leto. He's one of my favourite actors of all time. He was in Requiem for a Dream, which is one of my favourite films. So he would have had to have done a lot to ruin his part for me. I'm a big fan of Cara Delevingne. I always have been, as a model, as a personality. Every interview I've ever read with her, she just seems like an incredibly decent, nigh on inspiring human being. I haven't seen much of her acting work. She did a little teleplay on ITV, I think. I didn't catch that. She was in Paper Towns, which I haven't seen. I like John Green. Fault in Our Stars is, what I consider one of the best books I've ever read. I haven't seen the movie adaptation of that. I haven't read Paper Towns and I haven't seen Paper Towns, but they are things which are very much on my list. So I want her to be successful, and considering the fact that it's emphasised that she's had no formal acting training in any sense. She, as the Enchantress, She didn't really have a lot to do. She was kind of buried under a lot of CGI. When there are more dramatic moments, especially when she's obviously interacting with Rick Flag, she didn't seem that good, but she wasn't offensively bad. For me, a lot of the most interesting things to talk about with regards to Suicide Squad actually come from the culture around it. People have been talking about suing aggregator sites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and stuff because of the low scores this film was initially getting. Is there a conspiracy against DC that I'm not aware of? Billions of people are plotting to destroy the studio by pushing it down to 20%. If you're going to have net neutrality, if you're going to have freedom of speech, you have to let things like that happen. And you're just throwing your toys out of the pram if you think that you have a right to shut down a website because a bunch of people don't agree with you. On the flip side of things, Suicide Squad has made me think about how fandom influences creators in modern media. Again, I don't have much of a thesis on this. A lot of it just tends to focus on Harley Quinn and how Margot Robbie's interpretation, for it felt to me, was quite close to the original Harley Quinn, or the proper Harley Quinn, as I've sometimes been known to call her. Rule 34 has influenced this interpretation quite hard. This is quite contentious. There's probably a lot of people who will be able to give me evidence to the contrary, but in terms of my appreciation of it, we had the early 90s Harley. Things rolled along, the internet became a force, communities, forums, news groups, everything picked up on her, and as is inevitable, sex will creep in. Pornography will be made about her. Usually, you know, in the Harley and Ivy sense, but, you know, studios and creators and stuff will pick up on what fans seem to be sharing and talking about and stuff. And so a more sexualized version of Harley Quinn has developed. And again, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just reflective of the culture we are now in. So there's a lot of stuff I find interesting about Suicide Squad. But in terms of boiling it down to a film you pay to go and see in the cinema, I recommend it if you and your friends want to go and see a fun film. Maybe read up on some of the character bios before you go and then turn up 40 minutes late. This works quite nicely as far as I'm concerned. So yes, go and see it and have a good one.